23. Inside the control room archives, Angelina was idly tapping at one of the database terminals when she stumbled across a file of digital documents. Her eyes skimmed the text, then she read aloud with exaggerated theatrics. Botanical Gardens, Water Park, Safari Lodge, Innovation Center, Tyrannosaurus Kingdom, Triceratops Territory. Oh, here we go. Triceratops, Styracosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus, Torosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Arena, Cretaceous River Cruise with Suchomimus, Baryonyx, Jangusaurus, Stegosaurus, Patasaurus slash Brontosaurus, or Uranosaurus, Dryosaurus, Aviary, Gallimimus Valley, home to the Gallimimus and the Montosaurus, Diplodocus Highlands, featuring Euplocephalus, Parasaurolophus, and Diplodocus, and Gyrosaur Valley is packed with Pachyrhinosaurus, Stegosaurus, Triceratops, Kylosaurus, and Apatosaurus. She leaned back in her chair scoffed. Yep, definitely sounding like a prehistoric Disney World. Evans dipped in beside her, folding his arms as he studied the screen. Those are the Phase 1 attractions, the main centerpiece enclosures meant for opening day, but UGE is already laying groundwork for Phase 2. One of the biggest additions will be the Pliosaur Lagoon, a massive marine habitat designed for creatures like Pliosaurus and Ichthyosaurus. Plesiosaurus, I meant. Lucas's eyes widened. Marine reptiles? That's incredible. But wouldn't building something like that be completely different from the enclosures here? Exactly, Ethan replied. That's why it hasn't opened yet. They're hiring marine biologists, aquarists, even specialized aquatic veterinarians. The challenge is creating a lagoon that's both safe for visitors and suitable for the animals. Angelina rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with sarcasm. So, my dad and his Japanese partners are really trying to build Jurassic Disney World. Next, he'll tell me there's going to be a dino parade with balloons and fireworks. Rivera gave her a look, but said nothing. Ethan, however, just kept going, unfazed. United Genesis already secured fossilized Pliosauria DNA back in 2000. The material was badly fragmented, so the gaps were filled with genes from modern marine animals, crocodilians, sharks, and deep diving whales. If the process works, they'll be the first marine reptiles to swim the ocean in over 65 million years. Leaned forward, captivated. Uh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, folks. Jolene about it under her breath. Yeah, well, I'll see until I see a plesiosaur doing tricks and without eating its trainer. I'm not impressed. Ethan chuckled at that, but then shifted the conversation. Before all this, I wasn't working in genetics or security. I was a field man in environmental work, activism, humanitarian aid. I spent time with Greenpeace, even did campaigns of Earth Justice. I've been out on a couple late night episodes of Nightline talking about conservation and environmental abuse. Before United Genesis, I spent years providing humanitarian aid in places most people wouldn't go. War torn regions like Afghanistan, Uganda, Chechnya. Dangerous, ugly work, but it mattered. Lucas gave him an earnest look. It's impressive, no offense, but I didn't expect someone from UGE to have security to have that kind of background. Life takes strange turns, instead of a faint smile. But I like to think the work I do here, making sure these animals survive in a controlled environment, isn't so different from what I did. This time, the refugees have teeth. Lucas shook his head. Sister. Yeah, except. Wait, yeah, except this time the refugees have teeth. Oh shit. I misworded that. Lucas shook his head at his sister, then turned back to Ethan. Do you know which species might end up in the lagoon? Like Mauisaurus? Elasmosaurus? Ethan shrugged honestly. No one knows for sure yet. The geneticists are still testing which fossil samples are viable, but I'm optimistic. If they succeed, we could see creatures like Mauisaurus or Elasmosaurus brought back for the first time. Till then, it's anyone's guess. Chapter 24. 2 hours later, February 3rd, 2004, early afternoon. The restricted wing of the sanctuary had a silence of its own. The walls were poured concrete, the floors are grated metal that clanged softly underfoot. Red fluorescent tubes buzzed, their light giving everything a faintly sterile pallor. To the public, this place didn't exist. Tourists never came this far. Wilson walked with a measured pace, hands clasped loosely behind his back. He watched the Thompson children carefully, half expectant the sterile utility of the facility to smother their excitement. But Lucas's eyes were alive with curiosity, darting from door to door, warning sign to Hazard Diamond. Angelina walked with arms folded around her chest. A sharp contrast, half bored, half waiting for a chance to speak. Lucas stopped abruptly at the partition section to their left. Behind a chain linked barrier stood a row of transport cages, each one massive, built with bars thicker than a man's wrist. Triple locks braced the doors. Inside, faint gouges marked the steel. Claws Claw scars frozen in place. What are those? Lucas asked. Vera followed his gaze. Her tone was calm, professional. Containment units, used during relocation. Some animals were flown directly from Sorna to San Diego, offloaded at the Indian waterfront complex. From there, convoys transported them to the sanctuary. Others were sent through Pennsylvania first. The airport we used wasn't unique. It still handles mostly commercial flights, but as cargo wing, gave us what we needed. To the public, the shipments were just machinery or livestock. Lucas leaned closer, his breath fogging faintly against the cold steel. So, these really had them. Rivera inclined her head once. Yes, every scrape in the metal tells you that. Angelina let out a scoff. That's engine for you. Back home, their headquarters takes up 200,000 square feet. Offices, labs, even vaults full of frozen embryos. If they could hide that in California, sneaking dinosaurs through a cargo wing isn't exactly a miracle. Lucas groaned. You always have to brag. She ignored him, continuing with a shrug. In Wilson's California, United Genesis pulled amber from Angola, Wyoming, Myanmar, even the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, all of it went through Palo Alto before anyone even saw it. People think of the islands, but really, it was always the amber first. Vera's gaze slid toward her. That's no speculation for now, she said it evenly. Let's move on. They resumed their path, leaving the cages behind. A stretch of open yard came next, where squat, windowless concrete buildings set apart from the others. Lucas pointed at it. And what about that one? Rivera glanced at it. Reply measured. Maintenance shed. It's larger than it looks. Inside, there's a small garage, a tanker truck, backup generators, and supply rooms. It also stores equipment for the park rangers and veterinary staff, tranquilizer kits, power tools, replacement fencing. Less glamorous, but found that building the sanctuary doesn't function. Lucas tilted his head, squinting. So, basically the same one as the one back in Minneapolis? You know, the one with the broken lawnmowers? Juliana rolled her eyes. Those were under repair. Lucas asked Rivera. So, the shed is for dinosaurs who need repairs? Rivera answered. You could say that. Wilson gave a faint chuckle. You'd be surprised. Most great projects rely on garages and sheds like this one. Everyone remembers the animals, but it's the spare parts and fuel that keeps things moving. Vera all allowed smallest ghost of a smile. There's also a van, a flatbed, and several other service vehicles. The building is more important than it looks. Lucas gave a dramatic shrug. Guess that makes them more important than the Innovation Center. Angelina smirked. Don't push it. They walked on, sound of the running water faintly in the distance now. Wilson slowed his pace, glanced at the siblings. Before I leave for Mongolia, I'd like to see one of the attractions with you both. Something outside all this concrete and steel. What would you like? Lucas answered without hesitation. The Cretaceous War! The Cretaceous War! The Cretaceous River Cruise. Julian lifted an eyebrow and shrugged. Fine. The river cruise. Rivera gave a slight single approval nod. That's a good choice. See a wide range of species there. I won't be joining you. I need to return to the control room. There are systems to review before tonight, but the guards will meet you at the dock. Her voice wasn't cold. You're professional, the kind that closed the subject without offense. Wilson inclined his head. Understood. They walked a few more steps in silence before Angelina spoke again. Her tone lighter this time. Also, do you think we'll see the dinosaur with a gigantic fin on its back? What's his name again? What's his name again? Lucas turned towards her. Spinosaurus aegypticus. Vera's expression hardened slightly. You won't see it here. The one encountered 3 years ago was not brought to the sanctuary. Its aggression made it a liability, too dangerous to transport or house. The cost alone would have outweighed any benefit. Lucas gave a small nod as if reassured. Julian muttered a faint figures. Didn't say no more. The corridor opened onto a loud path, where the faint smell of fresh water replaced the sterility of concrete. Somewhere ahead, hidden by trees, the river waited. Chapter 25. San Diego International Airport, California, February 4th, 2004, midnight. The air along the runway was damp and cold. The kind of chill that clung to the skin and made the concrete smell faintly of salt. Midnight had draped San Diego in a patchwork of glow clouds, but the city skyline still glowed in the distance. A glittering wall of light flicked faintly on the Pacific. The airport was far from silence. Beyond the security fences, cargo haulers rumbled, taxiway beacons blinked steadily, and the occasional roar of a commercial jet split the night. Yet, at this smaller landing strip, tucked away from the main terminals, it felt oddly private. Just one Cessna Citation Sovereign waited under bright floodlights. Its polished fuselage gleaming like silver. The words Engine Corporation and United Genesis Enterprises stood out and damn it. Sorry about that. Stood out in sharp lettering along its side, flanked by the double helix logo that marked the company's ambitions. Tom, the Thompson siblings stood near the edge of the tarmac, shoulders hunched against the damp breeze. Lucas shifted uneasily, hands buried in his jacket pockets, while Angelina watched in silence. Her sharp expression softened for once. Wilson stood with them, satchel over his shoulder, his coat buttoned against the chill. He looked tired but satisfied, the kind of exhaustion that came from completing something meaningful. Well, he said at last, his voice low, this is goodbye for now. Duga swallowed, not sure what to say. Jelena surprised them both by stepping forward and giving a small, respectful nod. Goodbye, Doctor. I actually hope you come back. Wilson smiled faintly at that, touched. I'll try when I can. I'll visit your family in Minneapolis. I like to see where you two grew up. Lucas's face brightened. Even Angelina, though she quickly folded her arms, didn't roll her eyes this time. The private jet loomed behind him, its steps lowered, the cabin lights glowing softly from within. Wilson adjusted his satchel. Well, that's my ride. Vera fell into step beside him as they approached the plane. She carried only a slim case, her posture as composed as ever. The engines gave off a low hum, ready but restrained, like predators idling in the dark. Inside the cabin was hushed and immaculate. Cream-colored leather seats gleamed under soft yellow lights. Polished wood trim reflected the glow, and a faint scent of coffee and leather hung in the air. The aisle was narrow but lined with comfort, very detail tuned for long hours in the end. Well, hold on, give me a moment, guys. Give me a moment, please. Rivera fell into step beside him as they approached the plane. She carried only a slim case. Oh wait, I already read that. Two pilots sat ready near the cockpit. Uniforms pressed sharp. One of them, a sandy-haired man with laugh lines at his eyes, looked up as Wilson entered. Dr. Wilson, isn't it? He said warmly. I caught you on Dateline NBC over Christmas Day last year. The segment on the new dinosaur data. Hell of a way to spend the holidays. Wilson blinked, caught off guard, and chuckled. Yes, Christmas in the studio instead of the field. It was unusual. The pilot grinned. They even brought up that whole business with the Kirby boy, didn't they? Back in 2001. Glanced at his cockpit with a smirk. Then raised his hands playfully, curling them like a claws. He let out a mock growl, half caricature of a T-Rex roar. Rawr! It was ridiculous, and yet Wilson found himself smiling. Not quite what it sounded like, but he said dryly, but close enough. Pilot laughed, settling back into his seat. Well, glad to have you aboard, sir. Rivera gestured to one of the white seats. You're in luck. A private flight at no cost to you. We'll stop at Incheon International in Seoul, then continue on to Chinggis Khan Airport in Ulaanbaatar. The rest of the way is yours. Wilson set his bag in the compartment above and eased into the seat, running a hand along the armrest. The hum of the systems beneath his feet was steady, almost soothing. Do I need to come back here again? Rivera shook her head at once. No, this was one of the last inspections you've done. You've done what was required. Wilson gazed back briefly into out the oval window, the skyline gleaming faintly behind the mist. It's a remarkable place. I've enjoyed it more than I expected. His voice softened. Tell the UNDOC I'm grateful, but think Engine and UGE Security Division especially. Their funding will keep our dig site active for years. Raptors don't stop teaching us, not even in death. Rivera's face was impassive, but there was the faintest note of acknowledgement in her eyes. I'll see that the message is passed along. One of the pilots leaned back slightly, catching Rivera's attention. His voice was polite but firm. Ma'am, we're cleared for takeoff. The doctor has to get to Mongolia on schedule. Rivera gave a single nod, then turned back to Wilson. Safe travels, Doctor. You've earned a rest. With that, she descended the stairs back to the tarmac. The hatch sealed with a soft thump. The engine swelled, a low thunder that grew into a steady roar. Citation taxied forward. Runway blank. Runway lights blurring past the windows. Wilson leaned back, adjusting his glasses, watching the city dwindle through the oval glass. As the jet lifted into the damp night sky, San Diego fell away beneath the clouds, only the dark Pacific stretched ahead, endless and waiting. Epilogue: Natural History Museum, London, England, United Kingdom, October 10th, 2004, early evening. The auditorium of the British Natural History Museum was stretched deep in grandeur. Several rows of fine theatrical seating spread outward from the stage, upholstered and arranged in a classic proscenium format. Doric style columns line the chamber. Their fluted stone. Wait, hold on, guys. Give me a moment. This is the actual last thing, I promise. Their floated stone rising to an interactively recessed ceiling decorated with ornate built moldings. The front, a broad decorative arc, framed the stage, above which a large screen glows faintly behind a polished wooden lectern. Dr. Nathan Wilson stood there, notes in hand, his voice carrying evenly through the historic hall. Between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago, he began, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other late archaic humans living in limestone rich areas of Western Europe, like the Iberian Peninsula, France, and Germany, as well as the Levant and Greater West Asia, would have encountered the fossilized remains of Ice Age megafauna, bones of woolly rhinoceroses, such as Elasmotherium, of Eurasian cave lions, mammoths, and even the massive short faced bear. Yet, while such remains were undoubtedly recovered, there is little archaeological evidence that archaic humans ever stumbled upon dinosaur fossils themselves. He shifted, his weight slightly glancing toward the screen as it shifted to ancient artifacts and skeletal engravings. By the Neolithic period, around 10,000 to 4,500 BCE, the rise of agriculture in Mesopotamia, Central Europe, and China, quarries and river valleys became common sites of human activity. Such places were natural repositories for fossil records. By the Bronze Age, from 3000 BCE to 1200 BCE, China's Qing dynasty employed so called oracle bones for divination, which many of which, in fact, the fossilized bones of sauropod dinosaurs. Meanwhile, on the other side of Eurasia, in Mycenaean Greece and the late Bronze Age Europe, late Bronze Age cultures of the Eastern Mediterranean, fossils of large mammals and reptiles weathered out of limestone were found and misinterpreted. Their true nature never understood. Images changed again as Wilson gestured toward them. At the height of the Roman Empire, during the Pax Romana, in the last centuries BCE and CE, fossils were sometimes displayed in temples. These, however, were usually whale skeletons, still awe inspiring, but not prehistoric reptiles. In medieval China, successive dynasties, even after the Three Kingdoms period, like the Sui, Tang, the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms periods, the Mongol led Yuan, and the early Ming dynasties, all continued the use of oracle bones, still unaware that many were ground down remnants of prehistoric giants. Hmm? Lasted well into the late Qing dynasty, faded only after the Opium Wars and the so-called Century of Humiliation. Wilson paused briefly, letting the progression of history settle. By the European Renaissance in the 16th and 17th centuries, fossils began to attract greater scholarly attention. They were called figured stones, or sports of nature, curiosities rather than evidence of extinct species. In 1614, the Italian naturalist, oh god, I'm going to butcher this, Ulisse Aldrovandi, produced some of the first detailed illustrations and catalogs of bone, though not yet recognizing them as belonging to animals long extinct. It was another 60 years before Megalosaurus bone was described, mistakenly interpreted as the remains of a biblical giant. Even into the 1720s and 1730s, misconceptions persisted. In France, the, the Maastricht mosasaur, covered in 1763, was thought to be a giant fish or whale. Even into the 1790s, fossil discoveries remained fragmentary, with no unified explanation. The screen flickered through with sketches of early finds. Only in 1824 did William Buckland finally describe that thigh bone correctly as belonging to a prehistoric reptile, Megalosaurus. Shortly thereafter, the groundbreaking fossil discoveries of Mary Anning along the English coast, the Ichthyosaurus and Plesiosaurus of the 1830s, propelled paleontological thought forward. Then, in 1842, Richard Owen coined the term Dinosauria, fearfully great lizards, a unifying concept for these strange ancient creatures. Wilson rested on both hands on the lectern and looked out across the hall. From that moment on, our understanding of dinosaur anatomy and identity began to evolve. The early Victorian vision was of sluggish, lumbering, quadrupedal lizards, but as research advanced into the modern day, dinosaurs transformed into something else dynamic, active, and ultimately closer in kinship to birds and mammals than to cold blooded reptiles. They were no longer curiosities, but a true chapter of Earth's history. He closed his notes, nodding slightly. That will conclude today's lesson. I'll remain for the next 30 minutes, should anyone wish to ask questions. Applause rose, echoing through the vaulted space. Wilson descended from the stage, feeling a rare sense of calm satisfaction. But it only lasted moments. Near the wings, a tall man in a dark suit intercepted him. His demeanor was polite but firm. Dr. Nathan Wilson? He asked, extended a hand. Yes? Wilson replied, cautious. The man gave a curt nod. I'm with the United States Department of State. I like a word. Wilson hesitated, then sighed. Alright, what's this about? The agent's voice dropped to a quieter, businesslike tone. You're aware Isla Sorna and Nublar, in the Muertes archipelago in general, has been under a strict embargo since the mid 1990s, jointly enforced by the Costa Rican government and the United Nations. I am, Wilson said dryly. But restrictions don't stop at everyone. Quite right, the agent admitted. In recent years, we tracked an uptick in poaching vessels, black market operators, and private zoo collectors after dinosaur eggs and live specimens. Their cargo doesn't end up in labs and museums. It vanishes into wet markets across South Asia, Southeast Asia, West Central Africa, and parts of Latin America. They use the old Indian inland docks on Sorna, the ones abandoned after the storm of 95, the ones that head out to sea. Quick in, quick out, Wilson frowned. And you're implying some of their shipments weren't intentional? The agent's expression hardened. That's the problem. Smaller dinos, Compsognathus, possibly juvenile velociraptors, appear to have slipped aboard as stowaways, hitchhikers. By the time those vessels unloaded along the Costa Rican coast, it was too late. The animals dispersed. Glanced around the empty auditorium before lowering his voice further. Over the past few years, rural communities in northern Costa Rica have reported strange sightings, creatures moving inland from the coast, through river valleys, across farmland, even into the central mountains, always in a straight line, as if following Ch- some instinct. Chickens found eaten. Good chunks of fields of lysine-enriched crops stripped bare. Farmers are terrified. Wilson's jaw tightened. So they're not only surviving, they're adapting. The agent said gravely. No captures yet, only tracks, livestock losses, shaken testimony. But the descriptions are consistent. Packs of compies and at least several raptors. For a long moment, Wilson stood in silence. The echoes of fossils, history, and lecture halls seemed impossibly distant now. The agent adjusted his tie and pressed a small card into Wilson's hand. We need expertise, Dr. Wilson. Someone who understands what these animals are and what they could become if this continues. Because if the small ones made it out, he'll let the silence finish the thought. Wilson stared at the embossed seal glide into glinted faintly under the museum's lights. Outside, London's evening shadows stretched across the great facade of the Natural History Museum. The applause had long since faded, leaving only the quiet certainty that the world was changing once again.